Okay, we are at the point where we need to animate our lower third. We have each of our graphics broken out into their own scenes. So I'm going to come into my first lower third, the main graphic here, and we're going to now animate this on. So first, when I open up my scene, you can see that we still have our background image on. So if you go into your scene, into your global settings within the background here, we are going to turn that check mark off. And that gets rid of our reference or background image. Now we just need to concentrate on animating these elements on. And there's a lot of different ways that you can animate these elements on. We'll just go through a few to give you a couple of ideas and or fundamentals of how to do it, and then you can experiment on your own. Number one, we have our red part of our bar. If we click on it anywhere in the graphic, it will highlight it within the scene tree here. I have a decision. Do I want to bring on the red bar by itself and the logo separately, or do I want to bring them on together? So in this case, I am just going to bring them on together, and that means I can group these. So I'm going to highlight these two containers. I'm going to go up into my G tab, or you could come over to your group setting here and just hit group, and that automatically throws it into a group. I'm going to rename that something easy called red. Now my red is all in one group within the scene tree, and that means I could move the logo and the red together. So however I want to do this, I can. So if I want it to come in from the left side and just land, and or I want it to come up from the bottom, I could, and or if I wanted to scale. So what we have over here in our transformation axis editor is an axis center, and we can even use this to help us animate too. So if I move my x-axis, I can move how or where I want this animation to start and or land, which will help us, because in this particular case I'm just going to scale this rectangle and logo up proportionately on the lower left, and that's why I placed my axis center on the left side and the bottom side, so that the center point is right here in the lower left of this rectangle. We also need to set our timeline here, and here's our timeline down here. So sometimes I like to work backwards in that 30 frames or 60 frames is where I want the lower third to land. So I'm just going to set my timeline marker to wherever I want here, and again, this is where I want it to stop or end. So I'm just going to hit set keyframe, and that advances it automatically. So I'm going to rewind all the way to the very beginning, and now I'm going to set my first keyframe with a scaling keyframe. So I'm going to come over here to scaling, and I'm going to take this all the way down to 0, and you can use your mouse and or just type in with the numerical pad, and I'm going to hit set key. Now when I hit play, that animation comes up from the lower right. Next, I'm going to go into the white bar and animate that on. And depending what we are using shape-wise or plugin-wise, it will be different on how we can animate this. So in this example, we have a rectangle. Now we could animate the width. However, the width only allows us to make it grow or shrink from the middle. So I want this white bar to animate on from the left side. So I'm going to go into the transformation editor. I'm going to use my axis center again. I'm going to use the x-axis to move it to the left side, roughly right about there. I'm going to use my scaling again, except this time I'm going to use it single. On the red bar, our scaling was locked, but this time we're going to change it to single. So at 30 frames is where my red rectangle ends, so that's kind of where I want my white rectangle to begin. So I want to come over here to my scaling, and I'm going to put that at 0, and I'm going to hit set key, and then I'm just going to take this scaling back to 1 where I had it originally, and I'm going to hit set key. Now I'm going to hit play, and our red bar comes up and our white rectangle grows. So there, once it comes up, it grows right, and we can always change the speed later. Lastly, we need to go into our text and animate this on. So we had hidden that, And there are a couple of ways that you could animate text. You could certainly do what we just did using your manual controls that way. We also have some plugins within here. So if you go into your plugins content tab and you scroll down to the text effects, there are a bunch of effects in here that will animate or are used specifically for text. So we'll use the text effects scale here. So let's drag the text effects scale right onto our topmost text, our headline text. I'm going to go into our text effects scale, and you can see when we dropped it onto their text that the text disappeared. So I'm going to come up here into my text effects scale plugin, and I'm going to use this progress percentage. Right now it's at 0, so that's where I want it to start. So I'm going to hit set keyframe down here, and then I'm going to advance this progress percentage up to 100%, and I'm going to hit set keyframe again. We're going to hit play here, and you can see how that headline now animates up. Now for the subheadline, we could just copy this plugin onto the next line if you want it, but we could use something else as well. We have other options here. Here's a text effects alpha, so we'll slide this one on, and when we slide that on, the subline disappears again, but it's going to work the same way. So we select where we want it to start with our timeline, and we want it to start at 0, so we'll go ahead and hit set keyframe, and then we want to advance this up to 100%. So we'll advance that up 100, we'll hit set keyframe, and then we hit play, and we have 2 animations now on our text. And remember, I said we could always go back and adjust the speed of that animation, and if we click on the stage, we now have access to our animations, and we can come in here and adjust the speed of it. So I definitely want the red to start or end right there, and when that ends, I want the white to start as well. Then, as that's coming out, here are my 2 text graphics, so I may want to move them as far as the time and or speed, and then I'm going to slide my subheadline back because I want it to start a little bit sooner and be a little bit quicker. And we can just hit play again, and there's our lower third. Now finally, you can come up into your keyframes and make changes this way with a smooth in and smooth out. Remember, we have our handles up here that we can click, and or you can come down into your dope sheet spline view editor here and grab your handles to experiment with them. So for example, you could grab a handle and change the variable here a little bit if you want to mess with the animation speed. And here you can see we grab the handle, how that changes the speed of that white bar coming out. And you could go through for each one of these. Remember, the scaling, the position, and the rotation all have their own variables here that you can adjust. And when you adjust the handles, you can adjust the ease in, ease out control and or speed of those animations. So you can experiment with that until you get it exactly how you want it. Once you have it where you want, obviously, we will want to save that scene. So just go ahead and click the save button. That scene is now animated. Alright, once you have your animation set, finally, you may need to give control to the producers or someone else who may be using this for on-air output. And obviously, you would want to change the name and or what goes into this content area. And to do that, we can use the control plugins here. So the control plugins just allow you to give control to someone else in another program, such as Viz Trio or Viz Mozart, so that they'll be able to change content or certain areas here. So in this case, we want to change the text. I'm going to slide a control text up into my headline, and you can see that it adds an object right there. I'm going to click on that text. I have a field identifier as 1, and then I'm going to do it also for the subheadline. So I'm going to drag a text control onto there. I'm going to click on that text control. I'm going to give this the field identifier of 2, and that way they won't cancel each other out. So when they go into Trio or an external program to play this graphic out, line 1 will be the main headline and line 2 will be the subheadline. So get your animation to the point where you like it, and then you just save it. And now we're going to move on to the next scene.